Actors, we've all got issues, so let's talk about them. I'm your host, Juan Ayala, and this is Actors with Issues. Hello, ladies, gents, and non-binary friends, and welcome to another edition of Actors with Issues with me, your host, Juan Ayala, where we take a deep dive into the world of entertainment with guests from TV, film, and Broadway. Today, I am joined by two guests. One of them is rejoining us. She was actually the second guest we ever had on the show way back in 2020. It's been almost 5 years, if you can believe that.
I can't believe that. That's insane.
And I am speaking, of course, of the delightful Molly Gazay, who in the years since we first had her on the show, she has launched her own podcast called A Living Album. She released her first ever full-length album, Manic, which has several bops on it. So please go check it out on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you stream your music. And we're also joined today by her latest collaborator, writer and director Dan Brown, not the novelist, easy mistake, for a one-woman, one-act play, and which had its world premiere last month at the Spark Theater Festival right here in New York City, and it'll be seen next at the Soup to Nuts Short Theater Festival in New York, and it will also be seen next year at the New York Theater Festival. Lots of New York. We love New York here. We're a big New York show, so thank you so much, Dan Brown, Molly Gazay, for joining us today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Juan.
Also for our first ever in-person episode of Actors with Issues. We've done over 200 over Zoom since 2020. Oh my gosh. So here we are for our first in-person one, and it's, again, we said before, before we started rolling, it's very talk showy.
Yeah.
I love the vibe.
It definitely feels that way.
But we know so much about Molly as she's been on the show before. And for those who don't know, she's also responsible for all of the photography and the art that we've had featured on the show, our many podcast art covers. All of that has been because of Molly. But Dan, let's dive a bit into your backstory. So what's your artistic path been like? When did you first get into writing and directing?
Well, writing, directing, I went to school for filmmaking, actually, and wound up taking up screenwriting in the School of Visual Arts, give them a plug. And coming out of that, I began writing short stories. I was in journalism for a while. I used to do stand-up comedy. I was a musician way before that, back in the early days, so always had some creative path going on. In the last few years, I've been writing stuff for the stage. Started out with monologues, and actually the piece that we're talking about here at the Gritarer Verde started out as a monologue that I had written. I published a book of writings and monologues and short stories in 2021, and then started taking those shows to the stage. So for about the last 4 years, I guess, I've been involved with writing stuff for theater and directing it.
Yeah, and with some of your shorter pieces like this, has there ever been a desire to expand them further to a full length, maybe do a film, anything like that?
Well, I did last February, I did a full-length play called Force. It was a one-woman play again. But it was a full-length, feature-length play. We played at the Chain Theater last February. Give Jen Jacob a plug. She's the actress who was in that work with me. So, and I'm working on stuff for the future that's full-length. But this play, in between doing the longer plays, I wanted to sort of keep myself, in the game. And so I had been doing festivals for the last couple of years. And the Gritarer Verde was something that was a monologue, but I felt like there was a short play inside there, so I sort of expanded it into there and applied to some theaters for their festivals, and then came across Molly and said, it should be perfect for this. So it just kind of, grew from there, and we did it, like you mentioned, at the Spark Theater before. It was really well received, and Molly does an excellent job. She's a great combination of comedic actress and dramatic actress, and she fills in all the colors in between, which is what this play really needs. So, as it's a one-character play, but she really brings it to life in it, if I dare say so myself. It's very entertaining.
And Molly, how did you first become connected with Dan? Was it a sort of typical audition, or were you approached? What was that like?
So Dan found me on Instagram. So do not discourage the power of social media. It was awesome. So yeah, he actually reached out to me on Instagram, and from there, we just started talking, and he was like, hey, I have this one woman, one act, and I'd love for you to read. So while I was at my in-laws in Pennsylvania, I sat in a little corner and we went through the script twice, and and then Dan basically just offered it to me there. And
It's a little different approach to the auditioning process, where rather than just putting something out there and having a bunch of people, come and audition or apply or what have you. I really just go searching for who I think would be good at it and then contact them and see if they would be interested. It worked with Force and it worked with some other things. And, you know, like I said, I've happened upon Molly maybe through mutual connections or whatever. But I checked out her reel and stuff. And just by looking at that, I was like, you know, I knew this was, and then we spoke. And so I knew we had the right person there. No need to go further.
And that's it.
Right. And Molly, what would you say has been the biggest sort of takeaway or lesson learned in this process? I know that because of COVID, a lot of us weren't doing any acting at all, and then the strike happened, so there was not even auditioning for film and things like that. So did it feel like you had to dust off some cobwebs to do theater again and lead something?
Yeah, so I've never done a one-person show. I've done I love working with people. I love being in, I was in, during the strike, I did a lot of sketch comedy on stage. So it wasn't that I had like cobwebs necessarily in that arena, but it was definitely like, oh my gosh, this is all on me. So it better be tight, because if it's not tight, then it's like there's no fall back on a friend or on stage. You're like, what's the line? You know? Like, so it really was like shifting gears from being an ensemble type mentality to being like, oh no, you are a soloist on stage and you have to create your ensemble by telling that story to the audience. And so with Dan directing and really coming up with some really beautiful imagery to help me along the way, it really did start to come to life in my mind. And so I really appreciated that. Because at first it was like, I don't know how this is gonna work out, but it did. It worked out really well. So, and I think the collaboration between the two of us really helped.
And Dan, for this experience, what has been the sort of takeaway for you?
I think that every time I do this, and in doing working with Molly and I'm just confirmed about how much I love, you know, live theater as opposed to any kind of medium I've worked outside of that. Just the working together. And the thing about theater that I find, you know, I have a one-person play, and we're very minimal with the set and the design and all. And it's just somebody out there telling a story. And if they see, you know, if we're in an airport, that person creates the airport. And if they see it, the audience sees it. And just getting that immediate reaction of the reveal or the different things that happen in this crazy story and hearing the audience react to it. I mean, I just love that. And just seeing it and doing it, it just lets me know that, you know, I'm doing something, you know, I'm on the right track and doing something I really love. Every time we do something, I just fall in love with it more, you know, the theater, live theater.
Yeah. And in terms of a collaborative process, have you written pieces, or do you look sort of forward to writing pieces that are with an ensemble, or do you really like sort of having this like single character or at least one actor? Because I know there's many of one-person shows who really play a whole range of characters, but yeah.
I'm actually working on something now. Next piece will be an ensemble piece, and even with a couple of musical numbers thrown in. Like after I did my book, and I did a show about that book, and then the next year after that I did something called the 11-Story Drop, which was 11 monologues and musical pieces thrown in. You know, I just find that sometimes like people say, you know, I'm telling 11 stories in one night, but people say, well, that's not a play. You know, it's just kind of not looked down on, but not seen the same way. And then they find the same thing about, you know, I put this one-person play out there, and people are like, well, that's not a play, that's a solo. You know, it's like, but it's harder. I think it, you know, having one person go out there and tell a story of a bunch of people by themselves, to me, I think that's more beautiful than an ensemble piece. But I'm up for doing an ensemble thing as well. But I still think that my favorite pieces will be the solo pieces, just like one person telling a story on stage, creating a world in front of the whole audience. I think there's something to be said about that. And I think as far as, you know, the actors or actresses who perform it, I think it's also a bigger pat on the back for them. Like when I write something, and we talk about, like I try to make something that's challenging for the actor or actress. So something that they'll go out there and people will see and go, wow, I never saw you like that. Or wow, that was challenging. Or wow, that must have been hard to do, you know, to learn all of that and to perform it. I mean, this character goes through a real arc that's pretty strange and is a very quirky character. And there's no breaks in between, so they just like, you know, so disappear and come right back in a whole different setting and stuff. So to me, I think that is you know, very rewarding for me to watch. But yes, to answer your question, I do look forward to doing ensemble pieces.
Mm-hmm. And Molly, for you, are you So, because I know you already mentioned you love to sort of work with groups of people. I think one of the shorts we worked on had a pretty big cast. We had like 15 people in that.
Yeah, it was, I think, 20 actually.
Yeah, and it was, but it was such a fun experience to work with a group like that. But do you ever see yourself, or is it something that you look forward to of having sort of smaller character-driven pieces rather than like a larger sort of story?
Yeah, no, I mean, and to Dan's point, like this character really goes through this huge arc of like, you know, switching from like being extremely emotional about something to very calm and then very angry. And so it has been really rewarding in that way and very challenging to have to jump, like context switch all these different emotions within the span of 20 minutes. And so I actually have really enjoyed it in terms of like isolating how I can go from 10 to 1 to 3 to 5, you know, in terms of like emotional levels. And I think that that's been kind of nice to explore, especially since I do love working with so many different people.
Looking back at your career at the early years, is there anything that comes to mind that you know now that you wish you knew at like 18 or 22 or back then, you know, everything?
Everything. You're a baby. You're still learning. You're still growing. Don't take life so seriously. I was very serious. I was like, I will be an actor and I will get out of this area and I will make it and da 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 da. And it's like, it's a journey. And I think at the time I was like so determined to just get out of a small town rather than like experience the joy of life that, or just life in general, that I really missed out on some really fun opportunities to kind of explore and be silly and goofy and have fun, whereas I was very serious about a lot of stuff. And as a Capricorn, we do age backwards. So so I'm learning that lesson now. But I think that definitely to also just remember that like fear is just a thing in the back of your head. It's not always necessarily something that you always have to be. And it doesn't always have to be the monster in front of you. And I was very fearful of, you know, what if they don't like me? What if this? What if that? So really understanding yourself, having a good community around you, knowing who's selling you snake oil and who's selling you a good product, which is very hard these days.
Everyone seems like such a good Samaritan, and then you find
Not
out.
Not so much.
Yeah.
But there are some really good people like Dan who reached out on Instagram. So like, you know, it's just like, I think that, but that all goes to like figuring out what your core is and then going from there and not sweating the small stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And Dan, what about you? What comes to mind is something you know now you wish you could have told your younger self?
Oh, you don't have enough time.
Yeah, I was like, condense.
But I'll say this, and it had more to do with some of what Molly was saying. All of that inner dialogue and all of that stuff, and that, you know, overthinking things, like writing something and being like, oh, if I put this out there, will people think that I think that way? You know what I mean? Like, and being either self-conscious about it or worrying about what kind of reflection my work will have on myself. Because I take it very personally and all, but you know, it's character-driven stuff, and just put it aside and just put out the best stuff. And you know, not even about being fearless or being afraid, not even considering that, you know. And I found that, you know, all of that stuff, like, if I could tell myself anything, is stop being your own worst enemy. Like, all of those things that I worry about, I'm worrying about them because I'm thinking about them. Like, I never wrote something that was people like, I can't believe you think, you know what I mean? Like, they've entertained like that, but and who cares anyway? You know, just being able to put yourself out there, you know, why not? And sometimes, you know, people will come to me or, you know, come to people and be like, boy, I wish I could do that. I wish I could write or whatever. But the reason they can is because they tell themselves they can't. Like, I mean, who cares what people think about it? And luckily, one of the benefits of getting older, and, you know, and I look forward to this, is that you don't care anymore. You know, it's like you see old people will say anything, you know? And I'm coming to that place in my life. So I don't really worry about it. Just, you know, don't be the reason you don't succeed. You know, I guess that to be the thing I would tell myself.
Yeah.
And the most long-winded answer to a question.
It's a podcast. Folks always apologize for rambling, and I'm like, it's a podcast. You're supposed to. Nothing worse than a 10-minute episode.
You're like, yes.
Right.
No. Maybe.
And actors are so often encouraged to not just stick to one thing, but to be a multi-hyphenate, to not just act, but they should also sing and maybe learn an instrument and also write and produce your own work and maybe direct some of it. So many things. So what would you say to a young actor who wants to delve into those different aspects of entertainment and not just acting?
Well, I remember when you were saying that, I just remember being in film school and people were talking about, oh, I just want to direct, or I just want to do cinematography. And the teachers would tell us, you're here, you paid for this stuff, do everything. So I think that's a good idea for people to try and to immerse themselves in as many parts of the creative process as possible. And I think that when you do that, you can see things from another person's perspective. If you're a writer or director and you're an actor, you can understand what a director wants from you. And also but when you're doing something, if you're the actor and you also direct, just when you're on that project, you're the actor. You know what I mean? It's like, so sometimes and I've never had that experience, but just if someone knows enough to, do the job you're doing at the time, and I think that, and I'm going to go off the topic here, but just working, what I learn every time I do this and working with an actor or actors, is I get better at it every time I do it, because I try to figure out the other person's process and see it from their point of view as well, and rather than being, well, this is what it's supposed to sound like, just do it. And people have different ways of working, and I think that it's even made me a better person in the real world, because I'm more likely to see other people's side of things. But I think that just the more you can immerse yourself in the business, A, the more rewarding it is, and B, I think the better you become at everything.
And Molly, what about you?
I agree when you're first starting out. I think that when you first start out, you should try everything. You should look and see what makes you really happy and really ignites you. I think one of the things that I would have also told my younger self is pick 3 things that you really love and you have your A, your B, and your C. And really focus and do everything with your whole heart with those 3 things. Because I think what happens now is that we are so inundated by having to be our PR, having to be our own social media manager, having to be the actor and the writer and the director and, that there's this sense of self that gets lost. And I will say, for the longest time, I was producing, as you know, so much that I really started to hate acting. I was and until I went back to Stella Adler, and I was like, oh, I just get to act. This is the thing that I love. So I would say when you're first starting out, absolutely, try everything. Because I do think it helps you with people in real life. And it does help with figuring out life and what the grips are doing and what the writer is expecting. But when you start to hone in, I think that's where the magic starts to happen. And I will say my journey from when the pandemic happened to now has really helped me identify I was doing way too much, insane amount of too much. And so now I've really boiled it down to just 3 things, and I have my A, my B, and my C. And A always comes first, and B as the alphabet goes, A, B, and C. And those are my priorities. So I do think eventually you need to kind of ask for your community for help in the other areas that you are less skilled at. And that's why we are artists, and that's why we have a community.
And you're also a normal person,
yeah.
which is rare in this business. And I won't even say that I'm a normal person, but just just knowing you the little bit that I do, you're a well-rounded person, you know what I mean? Which I guess is good for your health, like that. I tend to be very obsessive, and be watching something on TV and be like, I shouldn't be sitting down. I should be writing. I should, you know what I mean? But I talking to Molly, you're a good family person. You got, a good, a lot of stuff going on in life, and I think that's very healthy. And maybe that helps you with your art and stuff like that, where it doesn't become, why do I hate this now? But
Yeah. Well, I think it was that I didn't have work-life balance before, and with a lot of therapy, thank you, my therapist. I've really been able to see that this actor's anxiety that I think I've talked about probably to nauseum on a lot of things is not healthy. And then we don't see all the beautiful, intricate design works in someone's writing or in the script that we have to memorize in 2 days, and bring all those colors. And all of that anxiety and all of those obsessions that I had before, which I do still have some, so I'm glad that I have created this illusion of not so many. But you know, before when I was so anxiety ridden, I couldn't see all the beautiful, pretty things. So I do think that there's something about trying to level to a balanced space. I don't always succeed, but but I'm glad that Dan thinks it. I'm glad I gave you that.
Well, I don't set the bar very high. I know a lot of crazy people.
Oh,
so
okay, all right. Well, I'm glad.
And you know, in one's career, we often, especially when we're younger, we think like, okay, I'm gonna get a couple of co-stars and then a guest star and then my series regular and then I'm gonna do 100 episodes of a show. Yeah. Never works out that way. I don't think it ever has for anyone ever. Yeah. You know, careers often look more like sort of like a pulse. It's you book something and you're on a high and then you've got that slow period and it kind of just goes up and down over and over. So what do you do during those gaps in between projects to stay motivated, to not let that sort of get to you?
Well, for me, I've always tried to, and still do, create my own scene rather than waiting for somebody else to say yes to me or waiting for some kind of break to happen. I mean, I'm fortunate to have a wife who indulges me. I've spent, you know, I finance the shows myself, and you know, I'm not waiting for somebody to say, okay, you know, I don't do Kickstarter. I'm kind of old school like that. Like, I don't wait for people to give me money to do a show. It's like, I'm doing a show. It'll either take place in my apartment or it'll take place in a room. You know, it'll take place, but it's going to happen. You know, I'm not going to wait for somebody, you know, to say it's okay or to approve or give the, you know, the green light to what I'm doing. You know, I'm just doing it, and we're going to put the show on, and we're going to make it happen. And if, you know, something comes along and somebody wants to engage in this and take it to a higher place, but I'm not. My answer to how I wait around is by not waiting around.
I second that. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I have my A, B, and C structure. So A is acting, B is music, C is writing. And if I don't have, and I always have something to do within that structure. So if I'm not acting, I am writing music. And if I'm not writing music, I am writing sketches with my sketch comedy duo, Gazay and Lopez Comedy, or I'm doing any myriad of one of those things. And so it just kind of it's a beautiful cycle of creativity. And I have a very large family, so I never have any time to just really sit and chill because there's always something going on. But yeah, I would like to sit down and read a book, though. That is like my goal for next 2025. So, but yeah, just creating.
Yeah. And fortunately, we live in a time now where that's more possible. Mm-hmm. I mean, it used to be if you wanted to shoot something, you had to have, you know, rent equipment, whatever. Now, I mean, you could shoot a movie on your phone now, or you could, you know, record what we used to call an album. I don't know if people even use that term anymore. You know, on your laptop or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it used to be that you really needed someone to invest in you to be able to do something. Like everybody, you know, like having your own show or whatever like that. That's all possible now. So those sorts of things, you know, you don't have to wait around anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
And speaking of album, I do want to touch on Manic for a second before we go into our last segment. So what was that like? Because I know it was attached to the Living album, which was your podcast, right? Mm-hmm. You sort of, each episode touched on a different song and sort of led to the release of the entire album. So what was that whole creative process like for you?
Oh man, well, like, you know, doing a podcast is a lot. So it's been really fun. I've gotten to interview a bunch of people and hear how they experienced the songs and what it meant to them, which has been really nice. And two of the songs from the Manic album are attached to two films. A proof of concept called Miss Pink has Pink Neon City I wrote the theme song for, and that was just at Soho International Film Festival and Dances with Films in LA. So it's been really cool. And then Her Turn, which is a movie by Rachel Black Spalling, the producer Pete asked me to have a song on there, and that has my song Trapdoor, which ends Manic, the album. So it's been really cool to have them not only live on the internet and have people talk about them on like a podcast one-on-one kind of thing, but also to have them in these festivals and hear them and hear people's responses to the music. But yeah, it's been really cool. The whole album itself took about a year to produce with my producer Craig Levy. Shout out to Craig, he's awesome. some of the songs I had written back in San Francisco when I lived there and used to do open mics at the Hotel Utah. And then some of them I wrote like manic during the pandemic. So, because we had a lot of time. So yeah, a lot of them have are kind of living in different realities, and now they're all in one really fun album. And it's like a dark pop rock, I don't know what you call it. Like, a lot of people say it has like 80s tones, 80s nostalgia mixed with dark Demi Lovato. So those are like a lot of the sounds I got. So yeah, it's been really fun, and it's been really great to hear it and see people use it in their films, which is like a dream.
So before we wrap up, we're going to move on to our last segment of the show. We always do sort of a back and forth. It's not rapid fire. That stresses people out. You say a game's rapid fire, they get nervous.
Oh, yeah, I did.
They forget what rapid means all of a sudden. But Dan, we'll start with you. If you could have any superpower, which would you choose?
I guess flying, I guess. Why not?
Molly, preference to act in stage or screen? I know, it's like picking a child.
I know, it's like, you can't do that. To me, that's so rude. I guess film?
Okay.
I don't know. They're just so... Neither. I decline to state. I invoke the Fifth Amendment.
Right. Dan, what movie or TV show reminds you most of your childhood?
Wow, that's a good one. I thought you were going to ask my favorite movie. I was going to say like Good Will Hunting or something like that, but then that was not a good answer for this question. But I will say that I don't know, Galaxy Quest.
Molly, what's your ultimate comfort food?
Ooh, nachos.
And Dan, same question for you.
Oh, pizza. I was hoping you would ask me that.
Molly, what show are you dying to be a guest star on?
Star Trek.
Good choice.
I thought you were going to say The Bachelorette.
No. Missed opportunity.
Yeah. So you could ask me that one.
Dan, where would we find you on your day off?
With Molly practicing and rehearsing for the.
Molly, what movie never fails to make you laugh?
Oh, gosh, what movie? I think the first one that came to mind was like A Fish Called Wanda. I love Jamie Lee Curtis in that, and yeah. Yeah.
Dan, favorite performance you've seen live?
I'd have to say stage performance. I got to see, was it called True West? With Philip Seymour Hoffman and John C. Reilly. Wow. And it was they were doing a run, I forget what theater it was, but they were switching roles every night. But I saw that once, and I thought that was the best live theater or live performance maybe of anything I've ever seen.
Yeah. Wow. One of my favorites was with Phil Seymour Hoffman, Death of a Salesman. It was him, Andrew Garfield. Oh my God, I'm blinking. I just had her on the show not too long ago either. No. Yeah, but that was Phil Seymour Hoffman, like a true artist, like gone way too soon. He was just terrific. Molly, you're hosting a dinner party and can invite any 3 actors to join you. Who are you inviting?
Oh.
This is 3 people you want to sit down and chat and have wine with for a couple hours.
Okay, Michelle Yeoh.
Good. I mean, good choice.
100%.
Yeah.
I want to say Jamie Lee Curtis too. So basically, like everybody from the cast of Everything Everywhere
All
at Once. So it would definitely be Michelle Yeoh, Jamie Lee Curtis, and then I think Salma Hayek.
Good choice.
Yeah.
Dan, same question. Any 3 actors you can have join you?
You know, it's funny you said that, and I said if he asked me, I was going to dare myself to say so. I was going to say the cast of Barney Miller, but I'd pick any 3 of those folks.
And this one's for each of you, so we'll start with Molly. In 10 words or less, last one. In 10 words or less, what advice would you give to a young actor?
Go to therapy. And remember, you are fucking incredible bitch.
And then for you, 10 words or less.
Well, 3 words I'd say to anybody is go to therapy. But and maybe that's something I would have said to myself in my younger days if I had something to say. But as I something I was saying before, I'm not going to count words, but just don't be the reason you don't do something. Don't let fear be the reason you don't do something. And that less stuff about being a bitch.
Awesome. Well, Dan Brown, Molly Gazay, thank you so much for joining us today for our first in-person episode of Actors with Issues. Molly, great chatting with you as always. And Dan, thank you so much for setting this up for us and all of that.
You were wonderful. Thank you so much for having us.
Yay.
I'm Hani Ala. This is Actors with Issues with... There you go. It's doing so well. So well. I'm Hani Ala. This is Actors with Issues, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to Actors with Issues on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and visit our YouTube channel for full video interviews. Actors with Issues is executive produced and hosted by Hani Ala. See you next time.